Hello, I'm Bill Jones, and welcome to VYPE TV, a show that highlights local athletes, their schools, and their communities. On today's show, it's playoff time for girls basketball. We'll analyze some of the biggest early round games. And the boys' playoffs start on Monday. We'll preview the teams expected to vie for state titles. Plus, there's always something to talk about when it comes to high school football. Our recruiting expert, David McNabb, will be here to discuss the outcome of last week's junior days. And we'll let you know what's happening this week on VYPE's website. Earlier this week, the playoffs started for girls basketball, and North Texas is well represented with 2 of the top 5 teams in the state in Class 5A, plus 3 of the top 5 teams in Class 4A. We begin with the Panthers from Colleyville Heritage, a team that finished second in District 6 5A. On Tuesday, they face the Mansfield Timberview Wolves, a team that also finished second in their district, District 5 5A. This was the second time the teams have played this season. Their first matchup, December 4th, when Timberview squeaked by a 1-point win, but in that game, Heritage did not have its star point guard Alexia Standish, the senior headed to Texas A&M. They did on this night, and she scores 18 points for the Lady Panthers as Heritage battled from behind early in this game. They were behind because of Rhea Bennett, the 5'8" forward for Timberview, with the outside jumper. The game was a stalemate through the first half, but Heritage gets it going in the second half. Brianna Apodaca up to Morgan Hunt, who's headed to Colorado State. Morgan with 9 points on the night helps Heritage rally, taking a third-quarter lead. Timberview, last year's 4A state champs, trying to rally late behind Jalen Hines, but not enough as Heritage wins 50-46, advancing to round 2. And then Heritage moves on to take on South Lake Carroll in the area round, and this was a tight ball game again. Standish trying to bring the Lady Panthers back against Carroll, down 1 late, missed there. The key to this game was Cammie Mickens, the daughter of former NFL star Ray Mickens, with the defense on Standish. Tries to get the three-pointer off. It's no good at the end. It's Carroll with the win, 49-45 over Heritage. And now joining me to talk about this one and all the 5A girls action is Tim Polzer, as usual, editor-in-chief for VYPE magazine. Thanks for being here. I got to tell you, Alexia Standish headed to Texas A&M. I went out on Thursday night and watched a little bit of that game. I happened to coach her, Tim, when she was in 4th grade, and I was so smart, I had her sitting on the bench. She wasn't even starting for me because she was smaller than everybody. It's a terrific high school career. I look forward to seeing her play in college at A&M.
Well, absolutely. That snub probably just really catapulted her to a great stardom. You know, you see the end of the game like that, and whether it's Alexia or some other seniors on both teams, you realize how quickly their high school career can end just in a split second at the end of a game like that, and one of the more emotional times in high school sports.
No kidding. And how about the job Terry Morrison has done with South Lake Carroll? They're ranked 21st in the state of Texas. Of course, she came from Waco Midway, led that program to the state finals before coming to Carroll, and they've got a deep team and athletic team at South Lake Carroll.
Absolutely. I mean, they were one of the favorites. People were very curious about the coaching change and the way that program's really improved. Carroll's done a great job of really improving the other programs besides football in that district.
Carroll moving on, and Duncanville, one of the top teams in District 5 5A. In fact, they were in first place, a perfect district record, ranked 12th in the state. They started their playoff run back on Monday against Euless Trinity, which took 3rd place in District 6 5A. Pantherettes beginning what they hope is another long run in the playoffs. Vauche Martin leading the way early as Duncanville leads the Lady Trojans by 8 points through 1 quarter of play. Duncanville's defense forces Trinity to struggle on offense. Shots not falling for Trinity, but Tori Henderson with the rebound, and Evelyn Lengi would get the shot to fall. Duncanville led by 16 at the half. Duncanville relentless as usual. Tasha Foman trying for the three-pointer, misses. The rebound by Martin, she would miss, and Bunny Williams, 2 of her 19 points. Duncanville couldn't be stopped. 55-37, moved on to play Plano East last night. And Aledo taking on Fort Worth Dunbar in other activity. earlier in the week. In Dunbar, a team that had to forfeit 17 wins early in the year. Aledo ranked 4th in the state in Class 4A, and Aledo is able to hold on to win over Fort Worth Dunbar behind Logan Middy's 26 points. 58-54 was the final score. And in Class 4A, just like in 5A, as we mentioned at the top of the show, 3 of the top 5 teams in the state of Texas from our area. Aledo's Logan Middy. She is the daughter of TCU women's coach.
Aledo, another program, like we mentioned with Carroll, they don't get a lot of attention over there where they're located, kind of on the edge of some of the coverage area, but the football team dominates. Other sports are very good too, sometimes in the shadows, so it's good to see that team thrive.
You know, you look at the Class 4A area teams, and those Frisco teams just always seem to be strong. Of course, it's such a growing area up there, and Wakeland High School ranks 2nd in the state, and you also got Frisco Liberty ranked at the top 12.
Absolutely. I mean, they've got those teams. They've got really good rivalries built up with those 4A teams in that district, and the basketball teams thrive especially.
All right, we've got much more to talk about. In fact, coming up next on VYPE TV, we have a preview of next week's boys basketball playoffs, which will be packed with North Texas teams. And later, we'll tell you about last week's Junior Days with recruiting expert David McNabb. The boys basketball playoffs will begin this coming week. North Texas has some of the state's best teams in the latest poll of Class 5A teams. Check this out. Garland Lakeview #1, Flower Mound Marcus 2, Cedar Hill 3, North Crowley 4, DeSoto 5. Top 5 teams in the state. Duncanville's in at 11, Richland 22, and Coppell cracked the list this week at number 25. And in the latest poll of Class 4A teams, the top 2 teams from DISD, Kimball and Lincoln. Fort Worth Arlington Heights at 4, Fort Worth Trimble Tech at 6, and then Ennis, Woodrow, Everman, and Azle in the top 16 in Class 4A. And joining us to preview the boys basketball playoffs now, once again, Tim Polzer and VYPE recruiting expert David McNabb, who not only specializes in football, but also basketball, which will be proven in this segment right here. All right, let's start with the #1 ranked team in the state in Class 5A. That would be Lakeview Centennial. The Patriots of Coach Tony Malden, and what a team they have once again this year. We'll start with you, David.
Yeah, I actually covered them at the regional tournament in Waco last year because they'll go down to Waco. They have a terrific team. Todd Gotcher going to Texas Tech, Chris Jones going to North Texas. And Tony Malden's a great story that ended up at coaching at Lakeview. He coached out in West Texas.
He coached at Morton. I remember when I worked in West Texas at Lubbock, covering Tony Malden's Morton Indian teams back in the 80s.
Yeah, and that was a powerhouse team. That was a huge team. Went into college coaching, has done some missionary work, and then came back into coaching, ended up at Lakeview. And to watch them, part of the playoffs is the change in styles. Just like in football, one team runs this kind of offense, and everybody gets used to playing each other in district. But Lakeview runs a very technical college trap defense is what they call it. And they sort of let you walk across half court a lot of times, and then all of a sudden they're double teaming, they're doing what you would think of as zone blitz, where you think the guy's going to be open. Well, that's where they put somebody.
He's dropping into coverage.
Yeah, so it's very complex, and the kids at Lakeview have done it for a couple years now. So it's a very difficult technical thing for a coach to prepare to, you know, from a Friday night to a Tuesday night.
You know, and of course they're in Region 2, so their regional tournament in a couple of weeks, if they make it that far, will be down in Waco. Fort Worth is the host for the Region 1 tournament, and Region 1 appears to be stacked as well once again this year, Tim. And you start with Flower Mound Marcus, ranked #2 in the state. Yeah,
Marcus has had a really great program for the last several years, and one of the things that they do also is with the depth, and you've seen teams like David mentioned try to throw a wrinkle in when they play them during the season. Plano West really slowed the ball down, kept it close, but it's a team like Marcus that can be very versatile, no matter what kind of defense they run into the playoffs, that can really get all the way to state.
And the other thing about this Flower Mound Marcus team is they're still young. Of course, Marcus Smart is their top player, is a sophomore last year. I love watching him, especially his matchup against Plano West and Jackson Jeffcoat at the regional tournament over at Wilkerson Grinds in Fort Worth last year. He is one that college scouts are really after.
Yeah, he's your classic guy that in basketball might be considered a tweener at 6'3", 205, but he is so versatile. He can score as a two guard. He is a 6'3" kid. He's really strong. I mean, he held his own as a strength guy with Jackson Jeffcoat, who's 6'5" and 250. You know, he's got offers from everybody. It looks like it's going to be kind of Texas and Kansas with, you know, maybe even the lure of Kansas as that happens around here with a lot of the top players. But if you're going to go see a game, go watch Marcus. But I'll also tell you, I mean, hoops attendance picks up when Marcus plays, you know, whoever, you know, Duncanville Irving winner, say next Friday, or when they play their first game on Tuesday, or when they play a regional probably against Richland. I mean, you may show up at a gym and go, what is going on here? Because there's 4,000 people there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best first-round matchups is Duncanville against Irving. Cedar Hill is another team, and of course, Thomas Gibson, who as a sophomore a couple of years ago helped Cedar Hill get all the way to the state championship game. He's headed to Kansas State, and he's got some help as well, but he's a big guy inside for the Longhorns.
He is, and he brings that experience. I mean, the Cedar Hill players, they've been there, they've been to state, they walk on the court with not arrogance, but really with some pride and confidence no matter who they play, because they've competed against the best programs for the last 3 years.
And I fully expect to see Cedar Hill playing in the regional tournament in Fort Worth in a couple of weeks. And, you know, just look at that program, what they've been able to do over the last couple of years. And then North Crowley is also in Region 1, and we know what North Crowley's done over the last decade or so.
Yeah, North Crowley has a great program, and they, you know, Fort Worth Dunbar's kind of been a big story because they aren't as dominating as what they have been. But really, the Fort Worth power that's been emerging the last couple of years is North Crowley, and they have the talent, and they have the complex defenses and individual scoring that make them a really difficult matchup.
And of course, they do a terrific job. Well-coached team. They've had some guys, of course, the Langfords in the past. One of them went to Kansas to play, and Willie Warren as well, who's now, I think he's still with the Clippers, isn't he?
Yeah, I think Willie's still with the Clippers.
Rookie with the LA Clippers. Now, we mentioned Cedar Hill played DeSoto in the state championship game a couple of years ago. DeSoto, since they get stuck out east and they're playing some district games out in East Texas, we don't get to follow them as much. They don't have as many games here locally, but they're ranked number 5 in the state. And DeSoto, once again, a power in basketball this year.
They are, and you're absolutely right. When they play so many games out of the district or out of the proximity, some of their storylines get lost. But you know, they really kind of snuck up on everybody a couple of years ago with that state championship. They are just as good as the Cedar Hills and the Duncanvilles, and they're right next door, and they just right in the heart of all that basketball talent.
Well, and Matt Jones is a great player that they have. He played some as a freshman. He's a 6'2", 6'3" swing guard. I mean, he's going to be a big-time player. And again, you have Chris Dyer, who, you know, won state titles, you know, grew up with the South Oak Cliffs and the Kimballs, and now he's built that. I mean, he could easily be a college basketball coach, and they play the sneaker-squeaking defense. I mean, they play a lot of man-to-man, and it gets very tiring when to even throw the ball in. You know, you say contest every shot, used to be, they contest every dribble, and they are very tiring to play against.
And staying in that neighborhood south of I-20 there, you got Cedar Hill, you got DeSoto, and every year Duncanville's right in the mix too.
They sure are. That's just another program that you just expect them to compete for a district title, and really district title isn't enough for them. They expect to compete for a state title, and they're doing that again. They kind of started off rough early on. They play in a really hard district, but they've been holding their own lately, so you never know what they could do in the playoffs.
And a team that hasn't been on the radar necessarily very much over the last few years, but is this year, you mentioned them earlier, Richland in Region 1. They could be a team to watch.
Yeah, they would probably meet Marcus in the 3rd round to go to regional, but they're state ranked. You know, Coach Richard Bacon is again. He came from Lincoln. They don't have quite the big time talent that they've had in the past, but again, he runs the real up tempo. And if you're not ready for it, or if you make a couple of turnovers, all of a sudden they've scored 8 points in 35 seconds. So that'll be a really good matchup.
Well, we could go all day talking about these Class 5A teams. We haven't even touched on Class 4A, and you got Kimball and Lincoln, the top 2 ranked teams in the state. Maybe we'll have to hit on Class 4A next week. The boys playoffs do get underway this coming Monday. It should be a great couple of weeks ahead for boys basketball in the area. Our thanks to Tim Polzer joining us again this week. Now, David's going to stick around. He'll return in just a moment as we'll switch gears to talk about one of Texas' favorite pastimes, high school football.
VYPE DFW's February high school sports magazines are on free racks now. This month we reveal our Powerade all VYPE football teams, slating the area's best players and coaches, and 3 regional MVPs. VYPE DFW looks back at National Signing Day and looks ahead, ranking the area's top 2012 football recruits. VYPE DFW also presents our new redesigned website, providing breaking high school sports news and recruiting updates, as well as an opportunity for schools to profit from their own website. Go to vype.com/DFW today.
Time for our recruiting update now. With that, we welcome back in David McNabb. He is our VYPE recruiting expert and the author of the weekly McNabb Report. And lots to talk about even a couple of weeks after signing day, because all these schools are hard at work on signing next year's class. And junior days are taking place this month. And we've talked about last week the junior day down in Austin for the University of Texas last weekend. And I was surprised, David, that there weren't as many commitments as usual coming out of that Texas Junior Day.
Well, I think there's a couple factors at work. One, they offered about as many as they normally do, but Texas didn't get as many commitments. They got 6 commitments out of it, or they actually had one from the Arizona quarterback earlier. But, you know, 1, Texas is coming off a 5 and 7 year. 2, there's some other schools. Oklahoma's always been a player. A&M's a little bit big of a player. But in talking to the kids, I mean, TCU's in there. TCU's in the picture. They kind of want to look at TCU. Those drawings of that new stadium. Fort Worth's a really great town.
I heard they won the Rose Bowl too.
Yeah, they won the Rose Bowl there, and you know they're gonna do really well in the Big East.
All right, let's get into some of the specifics. The guys that committed to Texas last week, including Mansfield's Hassan Ridgway, a defensive end.
You know, he's a kid that's been on everybody's radar for a while. He's a basketball player, and I can't tell you how college recruiters love linemen who play basketball. You know, Keller's got a kid, Simon Gones is a big lineman. If you're able, particularly at 4A and 5A, the smaller schools, it's a little bit different. But if you can run up and down the court and you're willing to do it as some 275-pound player, and Hassan played for Mansfield's basketball, that is a huge predictor, is what the college recruiters look at.
You can tell he's quick off the line of scrimmage, has a little Leon Lett look to him there, Hassan Ridgway. Texas coaches have to be excited about that commitment. And how about Curtis Reiser, the offensive lineman from DeSoto?
And he's just a mountain, so that moves well, that's got pretty good technique, really good coaching. So, and he's played at a level, played against, major college, off the edge kind of guy, seen complex defenses. So he's a guy. Linemen typically redshirt just because it's so tough, and even though they're monsters, they got to get bigger and stronger. But he's used to playing against guys his size and guys 20 pounds lighter but lightning quick. All
right, there's a recognizable name. You remember former Dallas Cowboy? You've got to be old like us to remember Pettis Norman, but he was a terrific tight end for the Cowboys back in the 60s. His grandson, Alex Norman, a defensive tackle from Bishop Dunn, is committed to Texas.
Yeah, I always used to cringe when I started seeing kids' sons, and now we're into grandsons. So now it's been a while, but at least Pettis was more the 60s and 70s Cowboy, so that's a little bit better. When it's Troy Aikman's or Daryl Johnston's, when we're starting to get
we'll really be old.
Yeah, when it's Troy's daughters, we're for some basketball, we're getting old.
But Alex Norman, a fine prospect going to Texas, and then a guy we've talked about here from Denton Ryan. Of course, they've got several prospects on that defense, including Mario Edwards and this guy, Alex Delatorre.
Yeah, and Mac Brown, I wrote about this. He's a coach's son from Tennessee. he recruits a lot of players who were coaches' sons, and Aaron De La Torre was a big player at Irving. It played at Stephen F. Austin. Played a little bit in the NFL, played in Europe, and he's an assistant coach at Denton Ryan, as is Mario Edwards. Dad is a coach, and Mac really seems to have some sort of connection to find those coaches' kids that are hungry, that want to prove that they're not on the field because they're the coach's son, and Alex certainly is that type of player. I mean, he went down on Saturday, went to the basketball game, and he was one of those, if you're making the official offer, I'm making the official exception.
All right, and by the way, for you Aggies, we'll examine Texas A&M's early recruiting next week. The thing to take out of this segment, TCU changing the landscape of college recruiting. There's more to come on VYPE TV. We'll be back in 2 minutes. As always, there's a lot to find on VYPE Magazine's website. Here are some of the most viewed pages this week. Allen ISD's new stadium received a lot of press during Super Bowl week. The upcoming $60 million facility was the focal point for numerous articles that spotlighted high school football in North Texas. The second most viewed pictures this week, some great photographs from the Marcus Garland football game played back early in the high school season, but this once again proves Texas football is popular all year long. And at number 3, the Planoettes drill team performed on the world's biggest stage. They were the dancing team on the field during the Super Bowl halftime show featuring the Black Eyed Peas. You can see these pictures and more at vype.com/DFW. Coming up next on TXA 21, it's Big 12 basketball. The third-ranked Texas Longhorns taking on Nebraska. Then at 3 o'clock, Oklahoma squares off against Kansas State. And later, it's hockey action. The Dallas Stars fight for a playoff spot against the West's best team, Vancouver. It's all happening today on TXA 21. Thanks for joining us this morning. We'll be back next week at noon to bring you the best stories in North Texas high school sports. Congratulations to the Lady Dragons of South Lake Carroll.